I'm going to ask those of you who are school board members, a number of years' experience here, what caused you in the first place to seek school board experience? Ryan?
I think this was probably one of the ways to give the most to your community. In terms of the children in the community, that's probably the biggest investment we can make for our future. And so if you're going to have an impact, that's the most direct way to have an impact in your community, is with your children.
As you go back and think about it, Amy, what caused you in the first place to seek school board seat?
Well, it was a number of years ago, and my first child was only 18 months old, so I didn't have any children in the school district, but I'm an educator, and I thought this is a way I can really get involved before my kids are even in school and see how the school system works and how things are set up and start making a difference.
Has it been a good investment of time? Was that a question you asked yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't know if I was fully prepared for the amount of time. I mean, there's every month you get a board packet with recommendations and information from the superintendent, and it takes some time to go through that packet, but it's very worthwhile because by reading all that information and following up with questions with my superintendent, I find out a lot about how different programs operate, how decisions are made in the school district day to day, and it's just really interesting. I feel very fortunate I get to learn about what's going on at school.
Ryan? Investment of time?
It's interesting. I don't think I ever really thought about the investment of time. It's what do I have to offer and what can I do for the board and the community? And so for me, rather than looking at the time aspect, it was what else needs to be done? What's the next step that we can have a positive impact for the schools?
Rewards that you think that you have achieved. Is it 9 years you've been on the Pella board?
That's correct.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Rewards that you can point to.
I see board service as a really significant civic responsibility, and one that I don't take lightly, nor do members of my board and boards across the state. And I think that that's one job where you're impacting the future in a very positive way.
As you thought about it and thought about board service, was there an issue that drove you to seek board service? Amy?
Well, for me, there wasn't. There was an opening, and I was living in the community that I grew up in, and it just felt like a way that I could really give back to my community, be involved, and ensure that the children's futures and really the future of our democracy in a way is impacted. And so that's why I ran. There wasn't a particular issue.
That's very altruistic, but there are, Paul, board members I think that you've seen over the years. Superintendents must have endured board members who came on with a specific agenda.
Oh, sure. I think that at times a certain passion that one might have about a certain position might lead them to run for the board. But I think it's important for all to understand that you run for the board to serve the entirety of the district when you serve as a member of the board, not as an individual. And that's one of the challenges. It's something as a superintendent, it's my job to help make their service efficient and not too taxing. You mentioned time earlier, but to make sure that they're informed. As a superintendent, I'm a professional recommendation giver, and so I do all that I can to prepare them in advance of the meeting so their decisions are made with as much information as available. And for board members to understand that it's really a global look at the school district.
My early years, I served 27 years on the Mount Vernon, Iowa School Board. And early on in my service, I remember a superintendent sitting me down and saying, Dean, you're one board member. Even if you're president, you have one vote.
That's right.
And when you come to the table, that's a vote. And you do not have authority in any way over the schools unless at the board table you cast that one vote. That got me to thinking. And Brian, do you have any comment on that?
I'll be out in public and just one of the a parent or a community member will come up to me and, you need to do something about this. And I always have to remind myself when I'm out in public and as an individual, I really don't have the power to make promises. And I think that's important to understand. I can't say, for example, that teacher will never teach with us again, because that's really not in my power. It takes the entire board to take action. And that's really not the board's role either. And I think understanding, what we have the authority to do at the board table is different than what an individual might do.
These rates campaign promises. Joan, any comment on that?
Yes, I just might add to what Paul said in terms of having an agenda. Sometimes board members are elected, and the rest of the board doesn't really, except for our vote that we cast, have a lot to say about that. The community selects the board member, but I've heard superintendents say that sometimes individuals come into a board with that mindset of having an agenda and then work out to be really contributing, highly functioning board members. And I think that's the role of the rest of the board to help, bring up instances and try to help them along in that.
But Amy, people who seek school board leadership roles have strong opinions. How do you roll in that opinion and still contribute?
Well, I think the opinion is important because all of us on the board have different experiences and different perspectives of issues. And having that variety is what makes a board really highly functioning, because I'll ask questions and have concerns that my colleague will not. And they'll have different questions and different concerns. And it allows us as a whole, as a board, to look at an issue from multiple perspectives and consider all of that before we cast our vote.
The vast majority of people that run for school board end up being excellent school board members. And so I want to be very, very clear about that. But some do come into it with a single issue or a specific passion. A lot of times what you might hear people using as campaign slogans. Well, while they're running for the board, if elected, I will do this. And there's a lack of understanding there on the behalf of the community as well as that board member that when elected, they alone really can't do anything. That board has to speak with one voice as a group of 5 or a group of 7, whatever it may be in that particular school district.
But still, Joan, diversity on the board, differing opinions, lead to healthy decisions, I would think. Where does difference of opinion end and being a team player begin?
I was thinking about this earlier and thinking about, we all have our own journeys and disappointments in the educational process, both from maybe our growing up or from decisions that might have been made on your board before you ever got there. And I think it's important to recognize that and to balance it with listening to the breadth of information from our administrators regarding data, and then listening to all of the board members deliberate so that you can understand those differences of opinion.
I would recommend that anybody who is elected to the board, when you come to the board table, think about not this is how I'm going to vote, but think about what is the relevant information, the data that I need to make the decision, asking questions of my fellow board members and of administrators so that we're all fully informed. And I think that helps us make the best decision collectively that we can.
And I think that's a partnership between the superintendent and the school board, regardless of the size of the district. But in my district, there are 2,000 employees in the district. But the board has 1 employee, and that's the superintendent of schools. And it's my job to make certain that working relationship is as positive as it can be as well. It's not just their job. I work to keep my door open so that they can come in. If a single board member has a passion in a specific area, I'm respectful of that. And I try to acknowledge that and do what I can in that particular area. But it is the board's decision once decisions come to the fore.
So you're talking about once a decision is made, the board should be coalescing together and supporting that basic decision.
That's absolutely right. And, we don't always have 7-0 votes in our community, and I'm entirely okay with that. It means that the board members are wrestling through the challenges of those decisions. I think it's wonderful that they really work on those decisions and that they disagree occasionally, but once that decision's made, to move together as a one-voice group.
Someone here earlier mentioned, and I think it maybe have been you, Ryan, who mentioned you don't go into a school board campaign, if it is indeed a campaign, saying that teacher will never teach here again if I'm elected. But Paul has just said he keeps an open door. Does that mean an open door, though, for an individual school board member to go anywhere in the school? Or is it an open door to the superintendent's office?
You know, it's an open door to the superintendent's office, and I'll be clear about that. You know, Paul and Amy both hit on the key word here, and it's partnership. You have to work together as a board and with your superintendent as a true instructional leader and leader of your district. Now, the board members are ultimately responsible, but you hire the superintendent, to make those recommendations to the board. And so while it may be the open door, at the end of the day, it takes 7 of us to take action.
That's exactly right. And you know, I think that a good way to frame that would be focusing the board on outcomes. The board members, a lot of times before they understand exactly how the district works, they focus a lot of their energy on management and processes. And really, that's the superintendent's role in a district. The board should set outcomes. The superintendent, if going to be held accountable to those outcomes, needs to be able to design and implement the processes that will bring about those outcomes.
Let's move that thought that you said supporting the superintendent and the administration in doing that. And that part of that, isn't it, Paul, realizing the delineation of responsibilities? The board is responsible for setting a vision.
Correct.
And for hiring the superintendent. And then holding the superintendent responsible for that job.
Yeah, that speaks to what I mentioned earlier, that the board's work is best when it's focused on the outcomes of the district. I think legislation is always best when it's that way as well. It's focused on outcomes. It's okay to disagree, but that we're really focusing our energy on the outcomes that are desired and then empowering the leaders to make that difference. If you want to hold me accountable for the decisions that I've made, you have to allow me to make the decisions. And that's the real challenge that I think is in board service at times, is because we're dealing with people's children. We're dealing with people's money. There's a lot of passion in schools, and there should be.
Yes.
But we have to realize where those lines are drawn so that we can be effective as a team working together.
Well, Paul, as you think about the relationship that school board members have with you individually, you said that you like to have an open door and you invite school board members to come and visit about certain issues with you or to get information. But what should be the board member superintendent relationship?
It's one of that's really a two-way street. I mean, superintendents are just as responsible for this as the board members are. I always strive for understanding when we're working together on items. The reason I word it that way is that I rarely strive for agreement. I strive for understanding. I want them to understand what it is that we're doing, the backstory behind whatever the issue may be, the steps that we've taken to date. It's my job to regularly communicate with them.
But you are speaking there in an employee-employer relationship. But you have all the information in the background, and the person who is employing you, the school board member,
Right.
is the one who's there ostensibly to learn.
That's exactly right, and yet, I would respond to you with a yes and a no. I am not the employee of that single board member. I am the employee of the entirety of the school board, and so I really work to understand them as I ask them to understand me. I work to understand their positions, their interest, their priorities. Almost always in education, when there's a level of disagreement, it's not foundational. It's because we have different order of priorities that we're focusing upon first. And so we've got to work for that understanding.
Other side of the table, Ryan. Comment on the board superintendent relationship.
Paul calls it two-way street, and I call it a partnership, I think, earlier. And I think, understanding that, we're helping to set the vision, but it's in partnership with what's educationally important, what's instructionally possible. And so working together to understand where the district should go and how to get there. We can have our own opinion as board members, but we're hiring an instructional and educational leader for our district. And it's very wise to count on his input when it comes to making those tough decisions.
Amy, is that the way that you look at it too, that you sort of lean on the superintendent for certain information, but you also are an information provider? Are you sort of a sounding board from the community to the superintendent?
Absolutely. In your role as a board member, you're representing the taxpayers, the community members, and that's a way for the superintendent to get that information that he or she needs to help lead the district and provide recommendations for the board. And it's a process of building trust with that superintendent and getting to know each other and our work styles and helping us understand each other's perspectives. That's important.
And just to follow up on that, Amy, I think I've had a person in leadership tell me board members come in different flavors. I think I can think about superintendents in that way too. And so being a board member is very much like any human relations relationship. You have to work at it and develop a good level of trust. My flavor happens, I'm an encourager. And so I like to listen, to understand, and to encourage. And I think, as you learn what your role is, what you're good at in life, as you become a seasoned individual, you can use that in board service and further your relationship with your superintendent to develop a trusting relationship and to listen with intent to understand, as you pointed out, Paul.
As you look back on when you three here first became school board members, what was your biggest aha, I get it moment or surprise? Joan?
I think it speaks exactly to what Paul was discussing in the work of the board. What's the work of the board? What's the work of administration? And sometimes in early service, that got a little muddied when it came to some decision making for new school decisions. I found myself on maybe no less than three committees having to do with the movement of traffic around school, the color committee, and the landscaping committee. And I came away from that with some very decided thoughts that is not the work of the board. Those are administrative decisions. And what happens then is once you're part of that decision making, the people in the rest of the group view you as having power and authority, and when you don't really, and then the decisions that you make going forward, then you shouldn't be involved in the repercussions of that afterwards. And so that was a big aha moment for me.
I think Joan hits on a key point, and it's just, that you have to understand the board's role and the administration's role. And so many times we'll have community members come up to us to share feedback with us. And a lot of times you start to answer the question, but you step back and you say, I think the very first place you should have the conversation is with your teacher or your building principal. And I think that's an important issue, but really it's not a board issue. I think the best place you're going to have an impact is starting with your staff member. And for us, it's stepping back and understanding there are two sides to that.
Yeah, and what I found is, parents and grandparents are very passionate about the school. I mean, the school is the center of a community. It's the lifeblood of a community, and people are very concerned about how decisions will impact their children. And my aha moment was when I realized that I don't have the luxury of making the decisions at the board for what's best for my child. I'm making a decision for what's best for all the children collectively, and that was my aha moment.
Rewards of school board service. What is it? Amy?
There's just so many. I feel so fortunate to be part of that institution that is just central in our communities. I feel very fortunate to be part of setting the direction and seeing our kids have opportunities, new opportunities for them, and growing and meeting the challenges of adulthood when they leave us.
Joan?
I think one of my most rewarding things I do is I deliver diplomas at the end of the school year. We just did that a few days ago. And it's a very emotional time for me, and it's a very, it's indicative, or it is representative to me of how well have we done. I shake the hand and think, have we done okay for you, and for you, and for you? And I think about that, and I leave with a very good feeling most of the time that we've done what we could, but we need to improve.
And it made some of those long hours at the board table worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Brian?
Yeah, we have an annual board meeting where we focus on student achievement and the ultimate outcomes for the year and what we've done with the district in terms of, have our students all growing and have they all improved on their learning or expanded their learning. And I think for us, when the data comes back, there are going to be ups and there are going to be downs, but in general, are you making a positive direction? And that for me is probably one of the biggest returns.
If you could give a school board possible candidate now who is pondering, should I or should I not, what would it be?
I think I would tell a prospective board member not to be inundated with all the information that is coming at you, to know all the acronyms, to understand all the curricular initiatives and all the programs within the district. There are so many things to learn, but to focus more on what it's like to govern and what your role is as supervisory role to the superintendent, and holding the system accountable to the goals and the vision, and how to, as you become a leader, if you become a leader in your district, how to reach consensus and how to become a highly functioning board rather than be expert in all the initiatives in your district.
It's very important as a board member that you model continuing education and becoming better yourself. And I feel that I become a better board member with more education. And so I take advantage of all that the Iowa Association of School Boards has to offer as far as training us. That's what they're there for. And they're there to help us be better board members and to build better relationships with our boards and our superintendent team.
And that's very interesting to me, because I find the Iowa Association of School Boards as in many times the superintendent's best resource for their school board members. You've mentioned before, Dean, school board members have two primary responsibilities. One is to set policy, which includes the budget, which is a very large policy of the district. The second is to hire and manage the leader of the single leader in most cases of the school district. I always kind of add a third item to that, which is the board's job is also to help educate the community about what board members actually do, because it's not widely understood, even in not specifically in Iowa, but in America, what the role of a school board would be. But the Iowa Association of School Boards has so many resources that they can offer and do offer to board members and to superintendents to help keep that system healthy. A lot of times I've found throughout the state, you hear about times where something has really hit an unhealthy pitch. And that's the time they reach out to their support organizations like IASB. I would argue that it's best to reach out for support in times where things are a little more smooth, so that you don't wait for things to get off kilter before you're looking for that support. I would also suggest that people just spend time on the Iowa Association of School Board website. That is a wonderful resource. Just spending time online, looking at all of the tools that are available there. I would also suggest that they if they're interested in running for the board for the first time, stop in and talk to the superintendent, talk to the current school board members. We're all in this work because we want to be helpful. We want to make a difference. And I think they'll find that there are all kinds of resources that are available to them.